So again, everyone should be here for the Autodesk Vault webinar, and this is just about increasing your productivity by using Autodesk Vault. We will be talking about some of the, more entry-level information about Vault, as we will be talking about some of the higher-end stuff as well. So hopefully, if you are a Vault user already, you get something out of this webinar. But it is really focused on those people that have not used Vault or perhaps have reservations about it, adopting Vault to sort of address those concerns. Right, so what we're looking at right now is Autodesk Vault Professional, and you probably noticed that by the screen at the moment. Whilst I will be using Vault Professional, there's nothing, or at least anything that I do talk about that is not part of the Vault standard functionality. I'll mention that this is something that you'll have to purchase Vault for, which brings me on to my next point, which is Vault is free. So if you have any piece of Autodesk software, you've already got Vault. So I guess hopefully at the end of this webinar you'll think to yourself, why aren't we using it? Because realistically, I don't think anyone that's using AutoCAD or Inventor or any AutoCAD or Civil 3D or something like that, I don't think there's any excuse not to be using Vault. It just contributes so much to your drafting experience and really just reduces so many of these inefficiencies, and we'll be talking about them along the way. Right, so let's get straight into it. Let's have a look at some of the functionality and just the layout firstly. You'll notice the Vault has a very sort of Windows, Microsoft Office feel to it. So you have your tabs along here. This is your different sections of Vault. The area that we're going to focus on primarily is the Project Explorer area, and this is the area that's actually going to look very much familiar to you just from a Windows Explorer sort of scenario. Along the very top, you've got your project folders and so on and so forth. We do have some different colored folders there, and that's, some of them are project folders, others are client folders, and so on and so forth. I've just got different categories on my folders, and that means functionality for those different folders. And if I was to click on one of those folders, I'd see the files within that folder. You can see immediately that I've got lots and lots and lots of detail about these files. Infinitely more detail than anything I'd ever get from Windows Explorer. Things like the description is in there, as well as some other information, and the revision and state information is something that we'll talk about a little bit later. But the important information here is actually all being extracted, in this case, from the drawing title block, which is probably one of the most underestimatedly important features. It was really, really useful for getting or finding the right files and whatnot. As you can see, my file number there probably is not going to be overly helpful for me to find that file later on, but certainly the description information and project information is certainly going to be important for me to find it later on. What you're looking at here is a few drawing files, so DWG files, some assembly files, some part files, depending on whether or not you're familiar with Inventor. Down the bottom, I've also got a PDF, for example. This is really just to reiterate the fact that there are no files you can't put into Vault. If you've got an image file that you want to check into Vault, you can just simply drag and drop it. So let's say I wanted to put this JPEG into Vault. I can simply just drag and drop it into whatever folder I want to put it into, and it will put that file into Vault, just the same as any other file. With me personally, I guess anecdotally, I put every single file on my computer into my Vault, and that's simply because it's easier to manage once it's in Vault. I can put metadata on it, so an example of metadata is description information, whatever it is, and I can go and find that information very, very easily. So things like when I go and say I'm looking for a Lazy Susan or something like that, piece of equipment, I can just simply type it in and press enter, and this is like just doing a very, very quick, simple search, and it's found a Lazy Susan assembly, it's found a Lazy Susan drawing, it's found all sorts of information about that. So this is probably one of the first features that we have based on that metadata that we've got. So all that metadata that we've got there, we can search on it, and it's extremely fast search. In fact, you probably didn't notice it, but that just searched probably something in the order of 10,000 files in an instant and found 4 drawings within my entire Vault database, which is extremely fast. Once I've found the file I want, I can preview it, which I have information about how to preview things down the bottom. I've got history about the files. So for example, I've got 2 versions of this file, which is another huge benefit of using Vault. It means that when you save something, every time you save it, you get more and more versions, which means that if someone makes a mistake, you can always revert back to previous versions, and we'll have a look at that soon too. We've got uses, and this is extremely useful for those using Inventor, and in some cases AutoCAD as well. Uses, for example, will show you what parts are used within that assembly, and vice versa. If I click on where used and click on a part, it will tell you that part is used in this assembly. Now, for an Inventor user, this is extremely useful because it will tell you that if you were to modify this part, it will have an effect on all of these assemblies, which is important to know because just basically means it will give you information about whether or not you should copy it, whether or not you should make the change to that piece. And you can see it will tell you all of the information about every single spot that Lazy Susan is used in, which is extremely useful. If we're going to look at a drawing file, we can see any history the same way. If we've got any uses or where used, it will do the exact same thing. If this had XREFs, it would work the same way. We can go and preview the file, and again, if you're not a CAD user, the preview information is going to be extremely useful for you if you've got a preview there. There it is. The preview information here, you can see I can zoom in, zoom out, I can even measure if I need to measure, which is kind of nice. And you can see it's actually even measuring based on the viewport there and everything that I've got, which is kind of nice. And if I wanted to open this up, it actually is a DWF, the visualization file that I'm looking at here. So I can open it up in Design Review and make markups and whatnot, which we'll also talk about. So that's your basic sort of a layout, your basic Project Explorer, basic search, and your preview pane down here when you do find the file that you're after. So that's your basic layout. As I mentioned, all that detail that we've got inside of Vault is really, really useful. A lot of people don't like this sort of detail though, and in those cases they kind of want something more like a thumbnail view, which is pretty popular. And if you want small or large thumbnails, you can do that as well, and you'll be able to see all the files and DWGs and whatever it is in the thumbnail view, which is really cool. And as you can see, it's an extremely easy way to understand exactly what you're looking at and what you're searching for. And if you are, again, looking for that Lazy Susan on the thumbnail view, I can see the preview files of it in the same way that I did before. Let's have a look. So the next part I want to talk to you about with those views. So when we go back to detail views, we've got all this information here, but this is very sort of mechanical information. For example, fabrication methods, security class, those sort of things. They may be properties that are more relevant for my mechanical design. But when it comes to my electrical design, I probably want some different information displayed. And if I look down in my electrical webinar, you can see those pieces of information there are actually not displayed, which means that, you know, if you're an electrical engineer, you might want different information displayed here. Nice part about Vault is I can choose what view I want. So in this case, I'm looking at the default view, but I might have an electrical view set up, and it will show me all of the attributes from the title block in any of those drawings. So that's really, really nice. And again, I can search within that. I'm actually searching on information within the title block there, which is extremely useful. So let's have a look at how this might work in a CAD environment. So let's just jump into AutoCAD. I'm going to be jumping in and out of AutoCAD and Inventor just to show that it doesn't really matter what you want to use. If you're just an AutoCAD company, then that's great. Vault is just as useful for AutoCAD as what it is for Inventor and Civil 3D, Plant 3D, all that sort of stuff as well. So let me just go ahead and make a new drawing. And in my new drawing, I just want to, let's say, draw up something nice and easy. Let's say that's my drawing. I hit save, and it will allow me to save the drawing as normal. In fact, when you adopt Vault, very, very little changes, which is probably my favorite part about Vault. There's not a huge learning curve involved. In fact, it's something that you can train in half a day sort of thing, and from that point on, everyone's really, really good. So I'll just put a simple little folder there. So I've made a new folder, and I'm going to call it Vault Webinar. Save that drawing, and go ahead and check in. So I could have actually checked in the first place. It would have prompted me to save. But in my case, I wanted to do it in 2 steps just so we can sort of see the 2 processes. One of the other things it does, the first time you actually check something into Vault, it takes a little bit of time to create those visualization files. But the next time you go to do it, it'll be much, much faster. It's just one of those things firing up in the first place. So let's refresh our Vault here and have a look at our new folder that we've created. And there's our drawing. And you can see, if I was to flick over to my electrical drawing, you can see none of the pieces of information have actually been populated. So let's say I wanted to edit that information in that title block. Rather than doing it in AutoCAD, or perhaps you wanted to change multiple drawings at the same time. So you can imagine if I had multiple drawings in here. In fact, I'll even just do a quick little copy just so you can see me editing the information in multiple drawings. So just make a little copy of that Vault webinar, and I'll call it Vault Webinar -2. And we'll talk about how to do the copies and so on in a moment. Vault will actually go and interrogate that DWG, make sure that there are no references that are breaking, and if there are any references, it will actually update all those references. So I go and select on 2 drawings, but this could easily be 200. And let's say I wanted to edit the information inside of those properties. I'm just going to select on the properties that I want to edit, and I'm going to click Edit Selected Properties. And in this case, I'm now able to edit all of the pieces of information in the Vault. So title 1, 2, 3. So let's just go OK on that. So that's now edited the Vault Web DWG. And when we go back into our AutoCAD, once that's just been updated, when we go back into our AutoCAD, we'll actually see that, well, we'll talk about this in a moment, but we'll actually see that if we go to check out our drawing, we'll see it's probably out of date, which is good. And we'll go and refresh that file, and we'll actually grab the latest version, which is the version that has all those edits in the title block. So that right there is a way to save an amazing amount of time, especially when you need to make multiple changes in multiple drawing title blocks. It's extremely useful when editing, hundreds of drawings at a time. So let's say in the situation where you've got, the address has changed and you need to update 1,000 drawings or something like that, that for Vault is extremely useful. So let's say we just wanted to do that and update the address on those 2 drawings. There's the address field. Let's just say 470 Collins Street, and let's just drag and drop that down as if we were using Excel. Apply that. That will update those two drawings. And we've now got those two drawings with the updated information for 470 Collins Street, which can then be applied into our drawing again. And again, we're looking at a historical version, so let's just refresh that file. And we'll see that the 470 Collins Street has been added to this drawing as well. So that's just a way of being able to show you how we can edit, the title blocks of multiple drawings at the same time, which is extremely useful. Right, so that's pretty straightforward. As I've been saying, as we're doing all this work, it's actually creating historical versions for me. So let's do a couple of changes that are actually going to be obvious changes. I'm just going to draw a couple of circles, just something that has changed in the drawing, and as I check it back in, and let me just go ahead and do that. So we'll go and put that back into the Vault. And as it goes back into Vault, let's just refresh this drawing view here. We'll see that in the history of this drawing, we've now got quite a few versions. So versions where the properties were edited, and then versions where we've added more circles or whatever it is, so you can see the thumbnail view difference between the two versions. Obviously, at any point we can revert back to a previous version if the situation arises that someone's made a mistake, those two circles are not supposed to be there, so let's revert back to this one. It can even be something in a catastrophe situation where the drawing gets corrupted, which doesn't happen often these days, but it might. And in that case, you could always revert back to this previous version. It's not a delta between the two. You don't need both of them to be healthy in order for the previous version to work. All you need is the history in the Vault, which is extremely useful. So that's just a little bit about the title block push back and forth. And I think that itself is extremely useful. But that being said, in the CAD environment as well, as I mentioned, Vault manages links between all of XREFs and all of your Inventor parts and assemblies and whatnot. It manages all the links, which means you can rename, you can move files from folder to folder without ever worrying about breaking your assembly. So I actually have a little assembly here that we can have a play with and just show you some of that. This is just a base assembly, a base laser cut assembly that I've got, that I've made up in Inventor. I'm going to go and open up that from Vault. Now, whenever you open up Inventor, you'll click Open, and you've got this little Open from Vault button there, which will open directly from Vault. Or you can just go over to the Vault tab and click Open. It's entirely up to you how you get there. In this dialog box, again, you probably don't realize how much time you spend flicking through folders and folders and folders of files and whatnot. So you have a really good search built straight into here. That being said, we can also go and create shortcuts. So from within Vault, if this is the assembly that we know we'll be working on for the next 2 weeks or whatever, I can actually just drag that straight into my shortcuts, which means that from Inventor, if I click Open, I've got a shortcuts menu here, and that will take me straight to the part that I'm interested in. And that shortcut is per person. So what that means is I can have my own shortcuts, and if I'm working in a group with anyone else, they can have their own shortcuts. So let me go and open up that drawing, or that model, I should say. And you can see it's just prompting me to check out and update any properties that need updating, which is really nice. So here we are in our assembly, and just like normal, I've opened up things, I can place things in. So if I wanted to place something, I can place directly from Vault. If I use the Place tool as normal, I've got Place from Vault as an option down there, or I can click Place from Vault directly from here, which is something that you'll probably just get into the habit of doing. In fact, I use it so often that I've just put it on my right-click marking menu here. So I choose Place from Vault, and I want to go and add my Lazy Susan here. So I'll just type in Lazy Susan, whatever it is, it runs that search and finds my assembly, and that's something that I'm going to go and add into my assembly. So there's my assembly. I've just placed in my Lazy Susan for my assembly here, and I'm going to just constrain it very, very simply. Let me just constrain that. Make sure I've got the constraints right. There we go. So there's our Lazy Susan placed in. So that was just a simple right-click, place from Vault, run a quick little search on the part you're looking for. So if you're looking for a NEMA stepper motor or whatever it is, in this case that's what I might be looking for, you can see it's extremely fast just to type in what you're after and pull out description information and pull out revision information, whatever information you're looking for. It's much faster to search for it than it is to try and navigate through folders. So the point here is that even if you're just a single user, there's a legitimate claim to use Vault, even if you're just a one-man band, just because the amount of time it will save you just in finding parts and placing parts in or whatever it is just phenomenal. So that's one thing that I really think is of high value to everyone. And the other one, as I mentioned, let's say I wanted to change the name of that, or someone else had change the name of one of these parts. So we have a part here, and let me go and look at the number of it. So it's 866. So I go into Vault and I find part 866, and there's the part there. Now, if someone wanted to change the name of that, they might just right-click, rename. So for all you Inventor users out there, I'm sure you're all sort of a bit worried at this point. Whenever anyone saves a name of anything or changes the name, you would always break the assembly. But the really nice part about Vault is you never break the assembly. And you can even see, and just before I go ahead with that, I've even got the assembly open currently. And someone in the background is changing the name of the file. It's not even going to have any effect on my assembly at all. My assembly will simply say to me, hey, there's a new name for that file. You better go and replace it in. So, and that's what Vault will do for you. So back in Vault, let's go ahead and rename that to something silly like, webinar midplate or something like that, which is what I've called it. You can see midplate webinar. That's the name of the new part. If I jump back into Inventor, Vault will actually refresh and say, hey, your file is out of date. Let's refresh that file. And this would just happen anyway. And you can see the new name of the file has been replaced in. So there's no breaking of assemblies. You don't have to worry about broken links. If I was to do that without Vault, I would spend probably the next 5 minutes trying to fix that reference or point to the new file, and I'd have to go and find the new file. And if someone didn't tell me what the new file was, it would be very difficult for me to do. So that's something that Vault just looks after. You don't have to even think about it. And if I was to move it, let's say I was to move that file from one folder to another folder, so let's make a new folder here. Just call it test webinar and go OK. So I've got a new folder here called test webinar. I go into webinar here, there's the midplate webinar, and let's just go and put that into a different folder entirely. So we've just gone and moved the file from one folder to another folder. And again, this has all happened in the back end, and I'm just, if I'm an Inventor user, I'm just going about my everyday work. I don't even have to think about it. And again, Vault's telling me, hey, there's something updated about this. Refresh the file. And just to prove that it's now referring to that new folder structure, I'll go and have a look at the iProperties, and you can see the test web folder has now been updated on the file itself. So I think that is just the amount of time that it saves you not having to put things back together after people move things or rename things, which inevitably happens, is really just worthwhile. So let's just put that back into the correct folder, because I don't want it in that test folder. And let's go ahead and rename that back. One of the other nice parts about Vault, and this is something that you will need to purchase a higher end Vault for, is the automatic numbering sequencing. So you can see most of my files here have automatic numbering, which is something that I did mention that I'd tell you every time I come across a feature that is not part of the free Vault. And the automatic numbering that you've just seen is not part of the free Vault. So just be aware of that. So just one last time, let's just jump back in here and refresh, make sure that we're up to date. Yes, we are. Refresh the file. And you can see we're back down to proper numbering sequencing. Let's check that back in. And as you'll see when we check it in, we can update the file, and if I refresh my view, I'll have CAD preview there of exactly what I want to look at. So again, for those non-CAD users that want to be able to look at what you're doing in Inventor or whatever it is, you'll be able to see the updated view of whatever it is that you're trying to place in. So that's really, really useful. So I think that's a pretty compelling reason in itself to move to Vault, especially when it's not going to cost you any money. You've already got Vault, and all of the functionality, with the exception of the numbering scheme that I've just shown you, is all part of free Vault. So there's really no excuse not to use free Vault. But that being said, there are some features in the higher end Vault that are also of extremely high importance. In my case, what I've got set up is I've got things set up, for example, let me go ahead and choose a couple of files here. So with the higher end Vaults, you can actually set it up so that you've got workflow attached to files as well. So for example, you might be the designer, you might have a manager, and that manager might have an approval or something, or approval process that the drawings go through every time you make a change to a drawing, which is great. What you're able to do with Vault is basically make a digital workflow and using digital sign-offs to make that workflow work. So in my case, let's say that I'm the designer and I'm now happy with my drawings or whatever it is. I might now submit them for review, which would notify my manager to let him or her know that there is a file that needs to be reviewed or a drawing that needs to be reviewed. In my case, because I'm just using Vault by myself, I don't have anyone else to collaborate with. But what I do want to do is I want to mark that revision as complete. So I'll just go ahead and just go change state and go ahead and pick released for those state releases. And that's what I'll do. I don't want to go up the tree. I just want to go down the tree. So there's files I want to release. So I've just gone ahead and released those files. What that means is basically at revision 8, that file is now released. It's got a big symbol there saying that that file is no longer editable, and that's just part of my security settings. And again, if I'm just an individual user, this is still extremely useful to me because it will lock the file down, stop me from making any accidental changes to a released part. Plus, it will keep track of my revision as I go through the working and release process. One of the other really nice things is I have in the background set up what we call a job processor. And the job processor's entire job is PDFs and create DXFs. That can be set to do anything you want, really. But in my case, my job processor, and I've actually turned it on, but my job processor, its entire job is to create PDFs of any drawing files that are released and DXFs of any laser cut files that I need laser cut. So they're just a couple of really useful applications for the job processor, which I find is a huge time saver. And again, I don't need to be a big business. Huge benefits from using the DXF generator, for example. Because we have some sort of DXF generator, we have to manually save every file as a DXF. But with Vault and the job processor, which is what's running right now, it will actually go through and do that in an order. So we'll just give that a couple of minutes, and what you'll probably find is that that will go ahead and create it. It does take a second on the first time. I've just fired it up. but that's now creating a PDF, and you can see the PDF's now just been finished. And at this point, it's going and creating a DXF. Just let it finish those few jobs. Just refresh to see whether any of those jobs have actually been done, and you can see some of the jobs have been done. So there's the file there that I wanted to make a DXF of, and there's the or PDF, I beg your pardon. So there's the PDF file that was automatically generated, and I don't need to do any of that. But you can see the PDF file there, automatically generated from Vault on release. And I've just set that up as part of my workflow. So whenever I move a document from the work in progress to the release date, just make me a PDF because it's useful to me. And we'll probably find, yeah, that's now finished. And I've also got it set up so that it goes and saves me a DXF. But I've got a folder here called DXFs, and that's where all my DXFs get saved. So for example, if you had a shop floor and they have like a network share drive where you want all the DXFs to go to, I just tell my Vault to output the DXF to that network share folder, and that's sort of what I'm simulating here anyway. So you can see it doesn't pop up in my Vault, it just saves that straight to my network share, or in this case it's a local drive, but it could just as easily be a network share drive. And they can actually create DXFs based on any configuration you want. So for example, my laser cutter only accepts 2005 version DXFs, for example. So I've set the settings so that the DXF is outputted in a format, 2005 format. Again, I did mention this is not part of your standard free version of Vault, but it is extremely useful, and I think probably worth every cent that you need to spend on it. So that's a little bit about that. Some other stuff that I really like, which is sort of data standard enforcement, and this is again part of the higher end Vault, but it's an extremely useful way of making sure that everyone is following the same standard and making sure the information that we need is put on every drawing or every new file that we create. I have that data standard set up inside of my Inventor. So let's go ahead and create a new part file, and I'm just going to go and create a rectangle. So there's my piece of whatever it is. As soon as I hit save, my Vault is actually going to kick into gear straight away and give me a dialog box. And this dialog box I've actually configured specifically to enforce my standards onto every file that's generated from Inventor. So you would have your own selection of properties in here, and you might have a more extensive list, you might have a less extensive list. But that being said, you've still got a list of properties that you would want filled in, and it might be as simple as just choosing what material you want to use. And I beg your pardon, but I have, in my haste to prepare for this, I've just removed a whole heap of my local files that I want there. So I'm just going to go and download my local files. So actually, and this is probably a good point to make as we go through. I have a bunch of local files here, and the purpose of these local files being in Vault is that if I make a change to my template, or if I make a change to some standards or whatever it is, they can just be pushed out from within my Vault, and that's essentially what I've just done there. So let me just start that again with proper materials and proper templates. One more time, 45 by 45 by 3. And as we hit save, and that's a better list of materials that we've got there. So I'm going to make that mild steel. You can see I've got all of the folders that I can select from within my Vault. These are Vault folders, so if I go test web, for example, that's a folder that we made just earlier. I've got, for example, A2K Technologies, and I've got a list of properties. So this is sort of an example of a way to enforce based on the first selection, the second selection changes. So in my case, I've got A2K Technologies, and when I choose the address, it will only give me addresses that are relevant for A2K. So for example, if I was to change that to Autodesk, I would have a different selection. If I was to change that to Cool Orange, another company that we partner with, it would have a different address. So it's a really nice way of being able to enforce, being able to, based on my first selection, narrow down my second selection, which is really nice. Let's use a laser cut, and let's go ahead with, I don't know, test, whatever it wants to be. You can actually see that if I start typing, if this is a library component, for example, it will fill in with the rest of it. That's because library is something that a project number that I use a lot. This list of project numbers, you could have whatever you want, have suit however you want. I'm just going to use test and test as my description, and go ahead and check that in. You can actually see that as soon as you hit save, it's going to prompt you and say, hey, do you want to put it in Vault just now? And my answer would be yes, I do want to put it in Vault. And that would now go into Vault, as you can see there. There's my new part, and that's what it looks like. It's actually creating those DXFs or DWFs as it goes in, and that's why we're able to preview the file inside of Vault Explorer. So that's I guess that's some of the main stuff that I really wanted to cover. I can obviously talk a lot more about my searching capabilities and those sort of things, but I think actually the biggest benefit that I can get is being able to index all the information from within a title block, for example, and pull all that information out straight into my Vault browser. Not to mention, I can also edit that straight within Vault, and that pushes the information back into the title block. And obviously, I can make, rename files, move files from one folder to another folder. It doesn't matter whether I'm using AutoCAD or whether I'm using Inventor or Civil, whatever it is. They will all behave the same way. Once you start using Vault, Vault takes over control of making sure that your assemblies and your drawings are never missing extras and are never missing, links and those sort of things if you're an Inventor user, which is extremely important, I think. Not to mention that it integrates beautifully within a CAD environment as well. So as we saw before, if we have an assembly here, all I need to do is place from Vault. I've got that integration straight in here. I can go and search for whatever I'm looking for, and it will go and pull up exactly what I'm looking for extremely fast without having to waste time going through folder structures, looking for the parts I'm looking for, and then I can go and place in whatever I'm after. So they're the main points I really wanted to hit on today, just to make sure that, Vault is not just for the big companies, it's for everyone. And it doesn't matter whether you're just a single user or whether you're a company of 500 employees. It doesn't matter, everyone can get benefit from Vault, and that's why we have the different levels of Vault. Because, for example, at the high-end Vault Professional, you've got functionality there that's very tailored for the larger companies, whereas in the Vault Basic, you've got functionality that everyone needs, not just the big companies, but everyone. And I think that's really where Vault is extremely useful. So we've got a little bit of time left. So I'd like to just open up for any questions. If you do have any questions, just type them straight into that questions area there, and I'll do my best to answer them. Just as you're doing that, I'm just going to constrain this. So we've got a question that's just come through, SAP integration. So the answer is absolutely yes, we can integrate with SAP. We would probably want to know exactly what you would want to get out of that integration. So is it just for ERP integration, or is it that you want SAP numbering schemes to be applied into your Inventor modeling environment. There's a lot of things we can do with that integration. The simple answer is yes, we can do everything as far as SAP integration. In fact, we have many companies that have built default SAP integrations. One of them, which is Cool Orange, one of our partners that we use, and they've built a default SAP integration which can be tweaked, but it's got most of the functionality that people would want. So yes, we can integrate with that. We can integrate with almost anything, really, and it really depends on what you want. Some of the stuff that we do is certainly ERP, MRP integration, PLM integrations. We actually have a piece of middleware which we recommend that pushes and pulls information in and out of almost any system you can imagine. And that's something that we do all day, every day, really. So the integration side of things is becoming more and more popular and more demanded by all of our clients. So something we have a lot of experience with. Yeah, definitely. Just on the integration stuff, it's a lot of the time what we want to do is push and pull bill of materials information in and out of Vault. So that's something that we like to do straight from within Vault, because Vault actually has extremely good bill of materials information in it. So for example, this is an area of Vault that's only available to those using Vault Professional. But we actually have, and if I look at an assembly file here, let's have a look at this one here. If I look at this assembly file, it will actually have a full bill of materials on the assembly file. It's got complete change control, so it goes through a proper change order process which can be spawned by Kappa or whatever it is. When I look at the bill of materials, I can tweak the bill of materials directly within Vault, which means that no matter what it is I'm looking for, so it means that my bill of materials can be absolutely complete inside of Vault. If I've got any parts that I don't need to draw, for example, but certainly need to be mentioned in my bill of materials, the most obvious one would be something like grease. I need 20 mil of grease or something for a bearing or something like that. It's something I have to draw, but it's certainly something I want in my bill of materials. Packaging is another option you can include in your bill of materials inside of Vault. And this bill of materials that would be pushed and pulled in and out of a SAP or PLM system, whatever it is, which is extremely good to have. Any other questions? Doesn't look like we've got too many questions coming through, which is good. It means I've probably explained everything that needs to be explained, which is ideal. So how about I give you another 1 minute for any last-minute questions, and if that's the case, we'll wrap up the webinar there. If you do want the webinar for later on, it has been recorded. And it will be being put up on the website. So just go to the webinars section of the web page, and you'll be able to find all the webinars, including this one. If you have any questions or comments or anything like that about the webinars, you can send it to webinars@a2ktechnologies.com.au. All right, 1 more minute, and then we'll take off. Awesome. All right. Well, so we'll leave it there. Thanks everyone for attending. And if you have any other questions or anything that you feel you want answered, shoot us through an email, just to solutions or whatever it is, or just give us a call. I'd be more than happy to have a chat with you about anything Vault related or any other Autodesk product related. Yeah. Thanks very much for joining us.